What's up, everybody? This is Mario Maitland, also known as Rio. Make sure you go like and subscribe to our channel below so you don't miss out on any of this great content going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, got yet another episode of What's Next with Rio's podcast series. Before we get into anything, I would like to, just thank all my viewers for, continuing to support us. It's been a long journey, but we're looking forward to keep growing and improving as we go on. So we got yet another great guest. I've been on his show called Lexington Business Show. I'm sure you guys heard of it. It's a very popular show in the Lexington area. It's his podcast. So he's the owner of Branded 78, which is a media production company that creates various content for business, for social media influencers or anything like that. He's creating content, so go check that out. And like I said, he's the host of the Lexington Business Podcast Show, so make sure you go check that out. Welcome to the show, my man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's fun to always be on this side of being a guest instead of hosting.
Isn't it weird?
So I appreciate you. No, it is weird. It's weird because you don't have to be in two places at once, listening and thinking about what's coming next.
Yeah.
And you could just be you and answer. But it's always weird because it's you're the one under the microscope,
Exactly. Yeah. When we're done with this episode, I'm going to ask you, which one do you prefer, being the guest or being the host? And I want to see what your answer
All right.
is.
Yeah, I'll let you know. Depends how much you bang me around on this thing,
I got you, man. I'll try to do my best.
Yeah. All right. Let's do it.
All right, man. So go ahead and, introduce yourself. I know you're from South Carolina. You spent a little bit of time in Pittsburgh as well, where I can call you a Pittsburgh native. So talk about your upbringing in Pittsburgh and what was that like?
Well, so I was born and raised in South Carolina, actually, but spent a ton of time in the Pittsburgh area. Most of my family's from the surrounding suburbs of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So grew up a Pens fan, Steelers fan, Pirates fan, a Pitt fan, all things Pittsburgh sports. I've got a younger sister by about 6.5 years. I did a lot of music and stuff when I was growing up, a lot of concert band kind of things. Yeah, I largely have a music background, actually. I went to the University of South Carolina, studied music education and percussion performance. Got that degree, went out to Colorado State, got a master's in music performance as well, in percussion. And then that's actually how I got here to Kentucky. I got a doctorate from UK in percussion performance as well. And something that's really interesting about that whole journey and how does that really segue into something like marketing is musicians are always marketing themselves. We're always out there trying to fight for the next gig, whether it's writing, teaching, performing, criticizing, in a review type situation, serving on committees, things of that nature. And so marketing yourself as a sole proprietor basically is, in your bones, if you will, if you're a musician. And, especially in the classical music field, you're always out there trying to create your own opportunities. So you are having to drive your activities and not just sit around and wait. There are not a lot of activities to just sit around and wait for. So you really do have to go make them. And, with the current sort of situation with college and the student loan debt bubble and things that we know are going to burst, especially during COVID, we see that the brand of college is really kind of overrated. Yeah. Going to college, to go into the dorm to sleep and spend $25,000 a year to do so, when we know that we could just sit at home and kind of learn and live life in between those courses. All these things, we've been seeing this coming for a long time if you're paying attention in academia. And so it became not a place that I really wanted to be. I mean, there's a lot of infighting, if you will, with faculty members and things of that nature. Schools are kind of forced to, in a lot of ways, forced to teach certain things to just make sure that kids are constantly coming into the programs,
right?
Rather than teaching what's practical and actually applicable in their industries. So anyway, for all those reasons, I started having a lot less fun doing music and having a lot more fun helping other people figure out marketing stuff. again, I was creating content, filming things in the music world. And then my wife started doing some things in retail. And with the retail stuff, I was having a lot of fun helping her with marketing some things, whether it's music or retail, or if it's a business, if it's a restaurant, we're all dealing with just people. Started doing things on my own as Arvay Media, actually. And then I had a buddy in town that used to own one of the popular barbecue joints here. He put me in a room with 2 other people, knowing that the 3 of us were doing a lot with creating content and online media. And so the 3 of us that he put us in a room with, we figured out pretty quickly that we had what the others needed, if that made sense. So we put our heads together in this like 3-headed monster kind of situation and became Branded 78. And started getting clients as the 3 of us running the company. And, fast forward through COVID, lifestyle and changes and financial and family decisions and all sorts of stuff. So those 2 partners exited the company, and I took over 100% of operations. So that's kind of where we are today. And I'm giving you like the quick and dirty from South Carolina to today. And then with Branded 78, basically roughly the same time, we decided that, well, we need some sort of sales mechanism here locally. Like, we all know people, but they don't know that we're doing Branded 78 things. So what can we do? We decided that a podcast would be a really fascinating and interesting way to be able to sit down with people and build a platform as sort of like a non-salesy sales mechanism. So if there were people in town that we wanted to know and have a relationship with in business that maybe we thought we could be a good partner together, we'd be able to just reach out to them and say, hey, you want to come on our show? By being able to sit in a room with those people for 30 minutes, an hour, you get FaceTime with them. They're 100% focused on you. You get to really learn about each other. And it really made sense for us to build out the podcast. And it looks like our live failed us.
It might be on me because battery. But go ahead.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, I think it ended on your end, but I'll keep going. But yeah, so we created the Lexington Business Show again as a platform, and basically did like, I don't know why people say this phrase, but this is what came to mind: eating our own dog food, if you will.
Okay.
But like, if we're going to go out there and if we're going to tell clients that they should make content for the internet and so on, then we need to be doing the same thing and kind of proving out our thesis and what we're saying to them.
Right.
And so that's what the Lexington Business Show really is. It's going out, creating long form content. Also that part sales component, like I said, being able to sit down with people we otherwise wouldn't have an excuse to speak with. And be able to take that long form content and chop it up into smaller pieces for social media and, to also serve the community and share interesting stories by the people and companies that are here in this community.
Makes sense. Talk about the process. Obviously, you talked about, with Branded 78, the company, media production company that you have. You started out with 2 partners, and then they kind of branched off, obviously, and then you were the single, owner. Talk about how is that process of, adjusting to be the, main figure, the main guy and playing in that role.
Yeah. I think it was September of 2020, and the company was only about 13 months old officially on paper. And September 2020 comes, and we're on this 3-way phone call, which is not unusual for us to be on a conference call
right
at any hour of the day. But this one was unique because they were like, yeah, so want to let you know that circumstances and blah, 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 we're going to both be exiting right now. And so immediately, I remember this was like, I'm standing in our backyard. We just had dinner, and it's like, we just started. March of 2020, we had a lot of things that were lined up to start. So super exciting time. And obviously the perfect time for a pandemic to come in and wipe it all out, or wipe out a lot of what was going to happen. And so September came, and, we lost, I think, maybe 1 or 2 clients, but for the most part, everybody else was still good. Business was either stable for them or actually growing, depending
Sweet.
on what their vertical is. A lot of people actually did pretty well.
Absolutely.
So anyway, September came, get this message that they're going to leave. And, it's like ice kind of going through your veins of like, oh God, like, what does that mean? Cause it's like, I knew my role and everything I was doing. I know what they were doing, but then to have to absorb those tasks, sort of revamp my day to day and what that looks like and everything else. It's a little frightening for a second, but I've always been, if there's one thing about like that whole music background that I have, it's how to just figure out how to be a professional as freaking quickly as you can, because you don't have any other choice. Like, you're standing on stage and you're performing and something happens. Like I was saying, I'm a percussionist. What happens if your stick breaks? What happens if the instrument falls apart? You got to stand there and cry about it? Or is the crowd going to they're going to demand that you continue going here, right? So like very quickly you figure that skill out of how to just continue going. And it's like the same thing here, where it's
do you
like,
think
cool,
that
this,
do you think that it's like,
Go
do you
ahead.
think experience has like a little bit to do with it? Obviously you might not be in a situation
Yeah.
that you're accustomed to, but like you said, you got to keep going. Do you think experience, like, all right, I might not know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to tip my feet in and see what happens. And eventually, in the long run, you get that experience, and then, you get better at it. Do you think that has that? I'm sure that has something to do with it.
Yeah, of course I pulled from things that I already experienced that were in that kind of sensation of, getting yanked into something that was very unexpected. So drawing from that experience, it's like, first of all, that's one of those things where people talk about failure being a thing where you learn, and it's not really a negative. It is, but it isn't, right? So certainly through previous failures, which sucked to go through, in that moment in September 2020, two partners exiting, I just immediately remember those kind of failures and remembering, okay, take a breath. What's the very next step? Don't try to see, one of the things I remember kind of walking myself through was like, don't try to see the next 6 months or 3 years or anything like that. Just see like the next hour. Like,
Right.
What is the next step?
It's a great mindset.
What is that next, like, just constantly, just what is that one next step? Whether it's the perfect step or the right step or whatever, it's like, just focus on that.
You said it. Like, focusing on the now is just as important. I think it's even more as important than worrying about, the future, the long road. 'Cause, you don't know what's really going to happen in the future. Like, no one knows. You only can control what you can do, like,
Right.
in the next hour, later in the day, even tomorrow, the next day, you know what I mean? But you got the great mindset, Brandon. I'm taking it all in from you. Why the name Branded 78? Is there something behind that?
So the philosophy that we always have and we continue to run with here at Branded 78 is just to go and get started and not be paralyzed by thinking too hard about something or waiting for things to be perfect before taking action. So when it came down to a name, and we're sitting there filling out, official paperwork to create an incorporation, we're like, well, we don't really have a name, and we don't really care what the name is, frankly, because we care about the work. Our mentality was very much like Nike didn't mean anything until the name Nike was built. So
It's a quote.
the name in all of this, like, the product doesn't matter. The product is everything, basically. Whenever we were starting out, the name is not what matters. So we were like, I don't know. Like, we tossed out some like marketing name or words and things of that nature. And somehow, I don't know, we got on Branded. And then 7-8 was literally like, okay, well, we feel like we need a number in this name. Like, this is how low level, how much we didn't care. We're just like, I don't know, maybe we should have a number in this name. And we were like, yeah, cool, good idea. Let's put a number in it. And then we're like, well, what number? I don't know. What numbers do you guys have in your birthdays? And we figured out that we all had 7 and 8. And we're like, well, okay, so branded 7, 8. Cool. Branded 7,
I love
8.
it. I love
There's
it.
the name.
I never
That's how
actually.
much we didn't care.
Yeah, I mean, you're right though, because like when you look at the big name brands like Nike, Adidas, you don't necessarily think of a name like Nike. You know what I mean? But it makes sense. They have great product. Now you know what Nike stands for. But that's brilliant, man.
Marketing, we see so many people going out and trying to start up a company that they need all the branding to be perfect. The perfect typeface. We need business cards. We need the right colors and hex codes, and we need a business. We need like a mission statement and all sorts of other stuff. And it's like those things are nice, but like we already kind of, because of the thorough discussions we've had for many, many hours, we already kind of knew those things, and we're not inventing anything. We're just taking our own philosophies that we'd been running with, and the fact that we all really believe in those same philosophies. We're not convincing each other of them. We were just able to be ourselves to the point where certain documents that maybe we should have put together don't really matter, because I never would have looked at them anyway. But like mission statements and things of that nature, we could have put together, but we didn't. It's just like we're seeing other people around us just be paralyzed by, we got to look right. We got to look perfect. We have to launch, and we need to look absolutely professional, and like we got all our ducks in a row. And then you have us over there, maybe too haphazardly, I don't know, but we're just like, we want to start the business and go. Like,
yeah, that definitely makes sense. Or someone who's all about the product rather than the presentation and all this extra stuff. You guys just want to go and put out the best product as possible. Doesn't matter
yeah,
what the name is.
Yeah, so many companies spend all their time making themselves look good that they don't put hardly any effort into the product itself.
Isn't the product the most important thing? Isn't the product the most?
But so many people don't do that. Some people don't do. I mean, go look at some of the restaurants that maybe you go to. It doesn't matter if it's here in Lexington or anywhere. It's like you look at it and it's like, wow, the space is beautiful. The customer service is pretty good. The menus are like, wow, look at this. Like the menus are incredible. It's like all the branding and all this stuff. Get the food, like all the feels are here.
When you get
and then
the
you
food.
get the food and you're like, well, all that matters is your product. The other stuff is cool, but
that doesn't get talked about a lot, man. That's definitely true though. You can go somewhere and you walk in and you're like, oh my goodness, like why am I buying food from here? And then when you actually have the food, it's a different experience.
Right?
A whole different experience.
Yeah, and I mean, to make sure I don't sound like a complete hypocrite as somebody that's sitting here with all this fancy gear in this cool looking spot with a mic flag and everything else.
Yeah,
it's like,
official.
This was not day one. This is day 1200.
Exactly.
I mean, eventually we got SM7B microphones. Eventually I had the capital to spend on something as menial as this. You
go on. I'm the same way.
Eventually we got a relationship here at Scene-Cast to be able to sit in a cool spot like this. Eventually those things happen.
Yeah,
but those things only happen on the back of the success that we had early with just starting,
Yeah, talk about growing as you go on. It doesn't have to be perfect. I know so many people, it depends, because you have perfectionists who want it to be perfect, and there's nothing wrong with that from when you start out. But, there's nothing wrong with growing as you go on, because you get to learn and eventually, get to where you want to be in the long run. So what motivates you? What motivates Brandon Arvay, to, create this digital content for business and for influencers all over the world? What's behind the motivation for you?
Putting food and shelter and water in place for my family, number one. I think a lot of times we get caught up in the vanity of things, and it's like at the end of the day, you strip all the vanity away. It's like you got real human needs and responsibilities. And it's like Sure, I would love for everybody in Lexington and Kentucky and the U.S. to know who I am. To grow a brand or several brands to help achieve that. But at the end of the day, it's like the success of the company. It's always just put food on the table and take care of my 4.5-year-old, the one that's on the way, and my wife.
Congratulations.
So at the end of the day, thank you. Like those are the biggest motivators. Like anytime that we gain a new client, I think, wow, that's great success for our family. Anytime we lose a client, which I think we've lost like one, which is crazy for a 3-year run. We're still going.
That's
like,
really good.
Churn rates are real, and we haven't, knock on wood, we haven't had to deal a lot with churn rates. Now we will, now that I said it. But those are like the biggest motivators. Again, if somebody were to leave, it's like the first thing I think about is like family, also thinking employees. It's like making sure that they have what they need. Want to make sure that they have food and, money for their bills and like all those things. It's like some of those things are not necessarily my business, of course, but I care about people and the people that work hard to put food on my family's plate. So of course I want to return that favor and take care of them, So anyway, It's like, first is always family, but then after that, it's like, there's a lot of things I care about and what motivates me. There's personal brand. There's being a human being and having a little ego. And like, I feel especially now in such a social society, like, sure, I would love for people to know who I am. Well, why does that really, like, I always try to dig deeper. Like, well, why does that really matter? And
go ahead.
I think it all ends up back at this like existential thing of like, well, in today's society, why do we need people to know who we are? Well, so that we have opportunities. Opportunities for what? For money. I mean, what's everybody doing, right? Like at the end of everything, I think there's money, but not money for the sake of money, but money because we know that capitalist society that we live in demands that we have money to buy food, shelter, all the things. And then we cover it up with all the vanity stuff of like, yeah, I want to have a $500,000 house or whatever. I want to drive whatever kind of car. I want to wear whatever kind of clothes. And it's like, those things are cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, how many times do we need to open up Twitter and we see, who was it just 2 days ago? Was it Lil Keed that died?
Yeah.
24 years old.
Yeah, I believe so.
I'm like, how many times do we have to see people that have all the opportunity and money in the world, and whenever you strip that away, it's because that stuff doesn't actually matter. It doesn't really matter. So anyway, those are some of the things that motivate me.
What has been the most challenging part in the role that you play? What's been the most challenging part for you?
Yeah, I think doing the work. And also having enough bandwidth to think about what's next. Speaking of what's next podcast, right?
Yep.
Like there's, and scaling a company. We always hear of people talk about business in terms of like not working in the business, but working on the business. And it's like, that's a real thing. It's a real thing that I think business owners that are interested in building a real company have to contend with. A lot of people, they build a company like they actually just want to be freelancers forever because they think about money first and they price it in such a way that they're actually just freelancing. And because they want the money, they don't go out and hire help whenever they get too little bandwidth. So there's always the discussion of like, do I want to put the money in my pocket? Do I want to invest in something like a piece of gear?
Yeah.
Or do I want to hang on to this money for, a rainy day fund? Do I want to invest this in people? So, and if I were to use it for people, okay, what are all the tasks that I do every single day? I think that's where I am right now is like really trying to scale people. We only get 24 hours in a day. There's nobody that can create more or less.
Right.
And so if you're going to spend 6 to 8 sleeping, 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever days you want to end up working, And then the other time, you know, with family, I mean, that's how I choose to do it. It's like 8, 8, and 8, basically. It's like I want to work 8 hours. I know there were days where I've worked 24 hours, you know, 2 days in a row, whatever. Many 17-hour type days, stuff like that.
Right.
And it's like, but I'm in a different season of life. I really don't like that term, but I'll use it here. But I'm just in a place where it's like I have other responsibilities and people that rely on me. And so I can't just sit out here and, you know, like me sitting here in the studio at 7:49 p.m. on a Monday is unusual right now because I'm usually at home playing Legos and playing in the backyard with our dogs and my 4.5-year-old. Like that's what I'm normally doing right now.
I'm taking away your time.
Yeah, it's just different. And it's like, yeah. And it's like, we only get choices. We can either sleep, we can do work things, and we can do personal things. Like, you just got to figure out whatever ratio is right for you. And right now, all three are about evenly sized for me. And so that means starting to take some of the things off my plate as a business owner and being in the business and figuring out which ones should I continue to do, which ones make sense for me to have more FaceTime with clients because those relationships are important, which ones are like the low-hanging things that maybe somebody else can do. You know, I think that's where a lot of people get paralyzed too, is when it comes to hiring, they want to hire the perfect person. I need somebody that's at least as good as me or whatever. And then whenever that's like the discussion, then they never hire anybody because they think everybody's not as good as them.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So who are some of the guys you would say, or, you know, anybody in general, you know, that you're looking at that you try to take things from, you try to grow from? Any inspirations?
I try to learn from literally anything. I mean,
Me too.
I try to pay attention to myself a little bit. I try to really be like self-aware as much as I can. One of the things that I really loved about, I think it was grad school that kind of taught me, is like paying attention to the questions and the things that are actually not happening. So many times we pay attention to the things that are happening in the room, and I try to pay attention to the things that are not, because I think there's a lot of clues there too. But like one of the things in taking inventory of like, how am I feeling? What am I paying attention to these days? Last week, I actually found myself, like if I'm in the morning getting coffee or something like that, or driving in the car, I found myself turning on HBO Go or whatever it is, HBO Max.
HBO Max,
and,
right.
Yeah, and listening to stand-up comedy. And what I always find that like what I end up consuming is the opposite of how I'm feeling about other things in life, which I think is really interesting. It's like if I feel stressed about something going on, I find that like what I'm consuming is the opposite to help balance that out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So like I notice it like, you know, we have some client things going on, which are all great, but you ask like, what are things that you're learning, whatever. It's like, there's always new challenges of growth, and we have some new proposals that are out there. So with new proposals and more work means, well, I'm not going to be able to add more hours to my day. So that means new people and new tasks. And, you know, all the things I already said a few minutes ago of like, what do I keep on my plate? What do I take off? Those are the things that are kind of my stressors at the moment as a business owner. So to combat that, I found myself watching something funny. And not just funny for the sake of funny, but like somebody like a Dave Chappelle, who's making social comments all the time, of course. Whether you agree or not with the messaging, it's really fascinating. I like to pick everything apart. I enjoy the content of what's being said, but I also like to pick it apart and like, well, why did he use that word here? Like, what actually made that moment funny?
Yeah.
What made this moment a kind of moment? Why is he talking about this? What isn't he talking about here? So anyway, just picking that kind of stuff apart. I guess the comedic parts I pick apart. Somebody like Bill Maher, who's really popular back, I think, specifically in the 80s and 90s, but he still has a show on HBO called Real Time. And listening to his political commentary about stuff. And I always find it fascinating because he has a panel of people that don't think like him. And so you get this interesting little dialogue between him and others. And just like, I think of that as a political kind of thing and picking that apart a little bit in the relationships, because politics is all relationships. So really trying to understand if somebody brings up a concept of something that I don't really understand that viewpoint because I don't believe that. Right. I really try to put myself in their shoes and go, okay, I don't really believe that at all, and I disagree with them, but how can I put myself in a position to understand where they're coming from here? Exactly. And so I bring all this up to say, like, I think all of that informs everything I do with the Lexington Business Show, with how I present myself here, like sitting here cross-legged. I could sit here in 1,000 different ways, but I think about presentation. You know, I'm sitting there watching these different shows and like, why does Kevin Hart come out and he starts with a 5-minute thing with his kids in their house? I forget the name of the show, but it came out during COVID. It's like the one that he recorded in his home.
Yeah.
I actually watched that this morning. Yeah. So like watching that, I'm like, okay, what are the differences between these comedians? How about their comedy and what they say? Kevin sitting here poking fun at himself about certain things that have happened to him in the past and how he's kind of grown and matured as a comedian and a father and all these things. It's like taking all of that stuff and throwing it into a big pot and being like, well, what can I learn from this stuff? As a marketing person that's out here doing stuff for clients, I mean, I take it personally that we're doing the best job that we possibly can, that we're marketing to people that aren't necessarily thinking like us. I'm not, there are certain products in the world that I'll never need. I mean, imagine if somebody hires me to sell tampons. That's a real thing, right? Yeah. like I'll never be in a biological position to ever understand how that, like what that means.
Yep.
So how do I put myself in positions to really understand an audience that I can't understand?
Makes sense. It makes sense.
I can sympathize, but not empathize because I'll never be in that position. Yeah. So I think always challenging my own beliefs, reaffirming what I know, always that kind of stuff, I think ends up showing up in the work.
Yeah, I think.
And so whether I do that intentionally or unintentionally, I have no idea. I get a lot of enjoyment out of picking those things apart. And I know my wife hates me picking everything apart because that's just how I am. But great. I feel like that's what makes a lot of the things successful that we've been able to accomplish.
Yeah, it seems like you try to learn from absolutely everything. I love it, though. I love it. You're very technical. You want to pull pieces from anything you see, anything you come across. I mean, that's actually genius. I mean, that's how you do it.
But again, like you asked earlier about experience, it's like I feel like that's where that comes from. Is writing papers for a master's thesis. You turn the thing in, you feel great about it, and then you get it back from a committee and they think it's garbage or whatever. And then you figure out why. Well, because you didn't think about a whole host of things that you maybe should have thought about, like why wasn't this there? What weren't the questions being asked? Right. All those things I mentioned. It's like that was experience. That was I went through. I made this up. I don't know what the real situations were, but I know that I went through them where it's like not knowing what to ask or missing the right questions to ask or not, like not really digging deep enough.
Yeah.
And so through those experiences, I've been able to bring that here and really kind of
it's brilliant.
Go even further.
That's brilliant. Using your past experiences to continue to grow and get better as you go on and apply to your everyday life. That's sensational, my man. Brandon, I want to talk to you.
Appreciate it.
You already talked a little bit about your Lexington Business Show. I want to ask you, as a host to another host, what are some of the main things that you've learned, from your guests so far? I know you're 3 seasons in, so you've talked to a huge amount of people so far. So what are some of the things that you've learned from these people?
I think a through line, or whatever you want to call it, a trend that I've noticed. Just I've had everybody on the show from Eddie Russell, who's a master distiller at Wild Turkey, to Rich Redmond, who's a drummer for Jason Aldean Band,
That's right.
To Ken Coleman, who's one of the Ramsey personalities at the Dave Ramsey Show and everything going on there. So these are like big international names. But then I've also had mom and pops that everybody in Lexington would know, and everybody in between. And I think the through line with all of them, no matter what level, what industry or anything, is just like, there really is just such an unbelievable amount of opportunity out there. And all you have to do is try. Is like, there really is nobody out there to knock you down and keep you away. Now, I say that very broadly. I understand there's certain systemic things and, you know, certain situations. Of course, there are a lot of things that are barriers to success.
Right.
But it's always trying to find, how can I make this thing that's a barrier not be the excuse to keep me down? What can I do to work within and around that barrier? What can I learn from running into that barrier to maybe run around it now or overcome it in some way? I look at like Rich Redmond. It's like, he's been playing drums with Jason Aldean for 25 years or whatever. They were best friends before they were signed, before they were playing, you know, Rupp Arena, before Jason Aldean is one of the biggest names in country music. There's this actual friendship there, you know. It's like, what can I learn from that? It's like, have confidence in what you're doing. I mean, Rich is a fantastic drummer. He could have played with anybody, but he decided to stay with Jason. It's like, well, why? Because he had confidence in the product they were putting out musically. And they put themselves in the right situations to have the right relationships, to be able to cultivate the right brand for themselves so it's marketable, and get themselves in the right places to be able to get a record deal, to be who they are today. So that's something I could learn from like that particular instance. You have somebody like Eddie Russell that I mentioned, master distiller at Wild Turkey. His dad, Jimmy, was, I think, the original. I forget the right way to term this. I'm going to say it the wrong way, but he's basically like the original master distiller out there. I know I said that wrong. Sorry, bourbon people. But like, we were in Eddie's office recording with him, talking. When we were done with the episode, we went next door to the next office, and Jimmy was in there, so we got to meet him.
Oh, wow.
In the episode, we were talking about Eddie's son being the one to be groomed right now to come up and be the next master distiller. So he would be the third master distiller in their family of this major international brand. Everybody on earth knows who Wild Turkey is.
Yeah.
And so just, there's something very humble and familiar if you get in a room with those, well, really the two guys. I didn't meet the son.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like sitting in a room with, you know, I don't know, you go to any restaurant and you look over and you see an older gentleman, and it's like, yeah, that's the same kind of people. Like, you know, they had big positions with a major brand, and it's like, you would never know it to talk to them. Just really nice and down home. And I think there's a lesson to be learned there. It's like, you know, just treat people with respect, and like you would want to be treated. And it doesn't matter at what level you rise to. It's, you know, everybody deserves that same level of humility in the conversation. Yeah, and it's just like, it's really fascinating to just look at the personalities that are out there. There are a lot of people like Eddie, who's very quiet.
Yep.
And soft-spoken.
But he's different.
But somehow he's like running this crazy, well, was, because they sold the company, but was running this major international brand.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah. And then you have other people that are like just loaded and full of energy and,
bright
and crazy over the top.
Yeah.
And they also are able to do that. And it's just, it's kind of wild to see. And what I take away from that difference is just, anybody could do this, because there's not like one. I don't really see any in the guest chair. I don't see like, oh, every single person is blank, high energy.
That makes sense.
All sorts of energy. all sorts of, various genders and ethnicities and religions and heights and weights and like Southern accent, Northern accent, a Midwestern accent, some other sort of accent from another country. It's like literally you look around and it's like, man, this is the perfect melting pot of a group. And I think the lesson, if you're paying attention enough, is just like literally anybody could be, could do it, but put themselves in a position to create opportunities, and really, I think it really just starts with like having confidence in yourself. Because if you're not your biggest cheerleader, then nobody is going to be out there for you.
I think that's the most important part of it is the confidence. So if you're not gonna, if you don't believe in yourself, who's gonna believe in you? I mean, it starts with you.
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty much customer number one, right? It's like nobody else is. I don't know if that's the right way, customer number one, but like, you conceptualize the thing and put it together and everything else. It's like you're the one that knows everything about everything. You have to be the biggest cheerleader.
Yeah, exactly. It's yours. Yeah.
I mean, how else is anybody else going to buy into what you're doing? Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it should. But great advice. But I want to ask you this: any tips for the younger generation who's, looking to, start their own business, or head them into the marketing pathway, or in any specific field, whether it's sports, music, business. Share some tips.
Man, my brain just went to about 8 different places, so I don't know if I'm going to remember all of them by the time I go down some of these rabbit holes. That's one of the biggest things with me is like, hopefully anybody listening to this like can follow what I'm saying. I feel like my brain goes in so many different directions because I'm always considering as many sides as I can in what I'm about to say.
It's great to listen to, though. I mean, like, you can just sit back and I'll just listen to you all day. I don't. I'm learning, man.
Well, I appreciate it. Okay, good. And this is sort of an aside, and this is like the perfect kind of meta moment, but it's like, I remember being in 7th grade. This is a heavy one, just for a second, a heavy statement.
That's fine.
So in 7th grade, I remember being in English class, and it was, this is like a racially motivated thing, and I'll say it. So I remember being in South Carolina. Okay. I lived in a mile and a half or so away from Fort Jackson, the country's largest training facility for the military. So all of my friends looked like every color of the rainbow. I mean, everybody was born in Germany and San Francisco, whatever, black people, Latino people, right? Think about the American military and the makeup of that institution. Those were the kids I went to school with. And I remember there being this just old crotchety white teacher named Mrs. Anderson, was our English teacher. Yeah. And she just, like, this is just one of those things that I didn't pay attention to because I was in 7th grade and didn't know, I'm a kid. But now it just drives me nuts that it even happened. But I remember she would always make fun of the black guys in our class because they would say ax, like ask me a question or whatever. And it's like we know as mature people that there are dialects and there's different pronunciations, and dialect. There's another word to dialect that I can't remember, but there, like, that word is actually it's a cultural, like, pronunciation. I forget. Anyway, there's like a technical thing there that I can't remember, but like, anyway, it was just that moment of her calling them out in class that I remember that me as the white kid in the room that didn't say ax, and I always said ask, that I felt like I was on edge to say anything wrong. And I just remember it being such a weird class that, like, that was such, and this is not meant to be like a race discussion. It's a pronunciation thing. That's where I'm going with this. So hopefully that's coming across. But it was just like, I remember that being a very poignant moment where I became very careful in the words that I said, because I didn't want to be the next kid getting called out like some of these other kids were getting called out. And so, like, that class has always stuck with me about saying the right words. opportunity is everywhere if you look for it and you make it. You have to really, and I think experience is maybe the only way to figure this out, by trial and error. Another piece of advice, speaking of a market, is like, I mean, everybody knows that like business solves problems. And if you don't really solve a problem, then you don't really have a business. And so the other part of that, though, is like, just because you're seeing other people doing something similar or almost literally the same as what you want to do, doesn't mean you can't also do your part of that, your version of that. That just means that they're proving there's a market for what you're doing. I mean, think of how many energy drinks are out there. I mean, there's so many out there because all those companies believe like, oh, well, there's a market for this. I can just make my version of it. Heck, I just saw a Skittles flavored energy drink. Like it's crazy what you can do. You know, like that version of an energy drink is interesting. I mean, there's a million things out there that all have niacin and caffeine and all the same kind of stuff inside, right? But it's how you present it, what it looks like, the lifestyle that you market it as. Those are the things that are different, and that's why there's opportunity there. At the end of all of this, to bring it back around to what we kind of started with, was like, what motivates me? That was one of your questions. Right. It's like attention. Well, wow. Why does attention motivate me? Well, so that I can create opportunities. If I have attention, that means people see what I'm doing. They know what I'm up to. They know how they can partner with me. They know what they can bring to the table with a business relationship or even a personal relationship, whatever. They know what they can bring, and they know what I bring, and that all helps to create new opportunities. Well, what do we care about opportunities for? Again, for some people, that's the ego thing of like, well, I just want to be seen as successful. Is that bad? No. Is that good? No. It's just like the right thing for them, right? Yeah. For me, it's like creating as many opportunities as possible to do the right thing financially and pay off student debt and things like that. Be able to invest in things so that I can have money to feed my family and take care of them. So if I keep digging down, that's where all of that really comes from. It's to understand the art of attention. And I think that's the biggest thing probably for anybody that's alive. It's not the next generation. It's for any generation of 2022. If you're breathing, you need attention of some sort so you can create opportunities for yourself for whatever your goals happen to be.
I think it's genius. That's just genius. That's a genius mindset, picking up on the smallest things, because everything happens for a reason in the long run. Nothing is done randomly. Don't believe it. Like everything is there for a reason. There's always meaning behind something. We're so caught up, in not looking at the smallest details that we just walk right past it, and we don't understand that there's meaning behind it. There's right. Stuff that
I think something that in the last few years that's been interesting when you talk about like advice to people, it's to understand that human beings are basic. We've had the same brain for 100,000 years. Yeah. We're still very emotional, as much as some of my clients and friends believe 100% that we're all going to be remote workers. I absolutely do not think that that's true. I think we have Airbnb who just went to 100% remote work. Every single person that works at Airbnb has to work from home now.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
And because of the kind of job market that we have, companies have been convinced that, remote work is 100% where everybody wants to be because they want to live the life that they want and they don't want to have to come to the office. I think that's true for a lot of people, but I think what's going to end up sussing itself out over 18 months, if it even takes that long, is what we saw during COVID. And this is why I pick apart goofy stuff like the grocery store, because again, people are basic. Patterns that happen over there are going to happen over there, and they're going to happen over there. Why? Because we're basic, and the same thing happens everywhere, whether we see it or not. A lot of times it happens at a tiny scale and a big scale in a way that are happening, but we're not really paying attention to it. So like during COVID, for example, we had all these people that almost everybody's working from home, right?
Right.
Pretty much everybody, unless you're an essential worker, so We saw people do that. We saw the market change immediately because it had to. Then we saw people going back to work. Now we see people claiming that they want to work from home forever. But then they forgot that they also had the conversation with themselves that, oh my gosh, I need to get out of this house. I'm so sick and tired of sitting here. It's like, how are you the same person that 12 months ago was so sick and tired of working at your house, you got to get out and be around people.
Right.
Then now, oh my gosh, I just only want to work from home. Like, that doesn't even begin to make sense. So I think what's going to end up happening is all those people that are like, I want 100% work from home, I think a vast majority of them are going to be like, okay, I'm going to walk it back. I really need a few days in the office because there's just something. I had this conversation with Cash Daniel,
Right.
I think on Friday. I don't know if you know
I know
Cash,
who
but
Cash
he
Daniel
played
is,
linebacker at UK. So Cash and I, we work out of here all the time. And it's been a while since I actually listened to the podcast or watched it. But like, again, you talk about experience and influences and things. It's like those are things that I bring to the table in my thinking in anything that I do, in particular with client work. But it's how do we take things that are seemingly disconnected, unconnected, and connect them? That's why, like, through that exercise of trying to connect humans to different things, that's why I figure out that, like, people are kind of basic.
Yeah.
We're not very different from each other. When I talk about the Bill Maher political discussion, we see things happening on the news right now in our politics and whatever that, like, feels like we're super divided and super crazy off from each other. And it's like, if we tamper some of this rhetoric down and we look under the hood at each other, it's like, the goofy phrase that people say, like, we all put our pants on one leg at a time. It's like, that crap is so true. It's like, we're just people made of, the same stuff, carbon and stardust, as they say, right?
Yeah.
We all got to eat. We all got to drink stuff to make sure our body is going to do what it needs. We all have the
Exactly.
same needs as far as shelter. We all hate getting soaked in the rain. We're all scared of spiders and flying in planes. And, it doesn't matter where you are in the political spectrum or race or religion. Like, we share all of those things in some way. So if we would, like, strip away some of this stuff and we would be a little bit more sympathetic towards each other.
Yeah.
And understand that, like, somebody that completely thinks differently than you, if you try to put yourself in their shoes, you're going to see so many similarities. That's why I feel like I'm rambling and going down different rabbit holes, because this is all kind of the same discussion,
And it's
crazy.
crazy.
We're all so basic, and that's why marketing principles apply everywhere, just in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
That's why, I don't know. We're just so damn basic.
Yeah,
And I just encourage anybody to go and pay attention to the patterns happening around you, and you'll see them. And by picking up on those patterns at the small level and the big level, I think that will help you just kind of maybe not answer questions and probably make you end up with more questions than you had before. But, like, just to learn more about yourself and where you stand on certain things. And, I think at the end of the day, all humans are trying to figure out, like, what are we for? Where do we come from? All that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I don't have any answers for any of that stuff. Like I said, I've unloaded way more questions than I have answers for, but
It's like
I don't know if we ever get answers for them.
the more you dig, the more you dig, the deeper you dig, the more questions you have.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, I think to maybe top off exactly what I was saying a moment ago is just like, I see this with my 4.5-year-old. It's like, it's really fascinating thinking about people in general through the lens of dealing with a 4.5-year-old, or, I mean, even when he's 6 months old or 2 years old. You start figuring out just how much of an impact you as a parent have on this human being. That he's laughing at what you're laughing at. He's repeating the words that you say. He's repeating words that he hears on TV. He's identifying things in the room because they're in the room. He's only 2. Like, he's not going to be able to figure out that, like, oh, there's this thing over there, but I can't see it. He's only a product of the environment, literally the physical environment and the emotional environment that you bring him up in.
Environment.
So whatever is in the room, he's going to learn about. Whatever the words are in the room, whatever the physical objects are in the room, he's going to learn about. How you engage with those things in front of him is how he's going to learn he should engage with that thing as well. So literally kids are a direct mirror and reflection of the things and the people around them. And so if we don't like those things, then we have to change how they're being brought up.
That's where it starts.
Because that's it.
That's where it starts.
So, yeah. So that's why I think, being aware of yourself, being aware of others, understanding patterns, understanding how to create opportunities for yourself, how to leverage the privileges and benefits that you have in your life, how to sympathize and empathize at times with people that don't have them.
Right.
Understand your role within that. And yeah.
Definitely, man. So
feeling very philosophical today, but not very articulate. So
we do. So we do. And what's next, man? We let you say what you got to say. But speaking of what's next, Brandon, what's next for you, man? What you got planned?
Well, in the short term, just go home and remember what my family looks like today. Because I'm still here with you. And I certainly don't mind. That's not a no.
Nah.
And yeah, I mean, in the long term, I've had probably 4 or 5 people in the last month ask me, like, what's the 3-year outlook for whatever, Brandon 78, the podcast, whatever it is. And right now, I feel like I'm in that place where it's like there's not a definitive path just because life changes quickly.
Exactly.
I feel like COVID has done that a little bit, kind of built in a little bit of just like more going with the punches.
Yeah, it's pretty unpredictable.
To plan things out because yeah, and I mean, I can't imagine that we would ever get shut down like we were before, but I think it's one of those lingering things in a positive way of like, I think before we were really soft in such an environment where it's like, yeah, we can plan out 25 years at a time because that's how stable things are. There's fluctuations in the economy, and there's things going on socially, and all sorts of other things happening. But whenever you look under all of that, there was a lot of stability. But then whenever you take something like global pandemic and it shakes up literally every person on earth, it kind of lives with you a little bit, And so that's why I feel like coming out of it, rolling with the punches is something that I definitely have kind of like just absorbed even more.
Yeah.
In a good way, I think. I mean, we have a lot of growth happening. There's some really exciting things that are coming down the pipe that can't be talked about today, but they, a lot of good stuff that I wouldn't have known are happening to help evolve the podcast, to help evolve Branded 78 into things that we're able to do, and to do them at crazy high levels that I couldn't have anticipated 6 months ago. Those opportunities, again, being very vague because I have to be, but like opportunities at a national and international level don't happen if you don't put yourself in the right rooms with the right people.
Yep.
Creating your own opportunities.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's where I think school was really valuable for me, was, all of that studying, all of that stuff going through practice rooms and traveling and all that stuff, like prepared me to be able to master those skills as best as I can anyway, of creating opportunities and networking and sifting through the noise out there to figure out, okay, what's really a path I should take with this,
Yeah.
I mean, one of my former partners continues to push me with Branded 78 to dive deeper with sales and go do a lot more local selling. And I've always been the kind of person that's like, I want to have the biggest impact possible. I love working one-on-one with somebody and helping just a single person at a time.
Right.
I also love being in a position to be able to say something and help dozens or hundreds or thousands of people at a time. And I love being everywhere in between. And so it's like, that's kind of how, if you want to call it, the sales mechanism has been working. It's like, instead of going door to door, figuratively and non-figuratively, and like knocking on doors and being like, hey, can we do your social media? Can we make content? Hey, can we do this for you? Like, instead of doing that, which is what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
This is kind of what I was alluding to before. Having confidence in yourself to know that what you're doing is the right path. And doing things differently than other people is actually a good thing in a lot of ways. But you also have to know the difference between what is a standard thing that's expected in your industry and what's okay to deviate from that's going to make you stand out. In marketing, I don't get to make the rules about what a marketing funnel is. So that's like a standard. But when it comes to how do I sell my marketing stuff,
Right.
that's where I get to deviate. I don't have to go door to door like other people. I mean, I could, but I choose not to make proposals or knock on doors, like I said, and cold email people, cold call, cold walk in your business and try to hit you up and say, I want to make content for you. I could do those things, but I choose to do it in a more meaningful way that's a lot longer to come to fruition, but I think it's a lot more meaningful when it actually does. So like
Absolutely.
building those relationships with people that already have the audience that I want and need. I want the eyeballs of Lexington. I want the eyeballs of Kentucky. I would love the eyeballs of the US. Well, how do I get those? Well, do I go pay money for a Super Bowl ad? Well, no. So how do I do it? I go find other people that currently already have those eyeballs that I want.
Yeah.
So that's one of those things of like, something that started as a business transaction that's turned into a real, true friendship is like Cash Daniel. I heard that he needed help producing his podcast back in the fall. I think it was July. And so I just reached out and basically started producing his thing, and us spending all that time together, making his podcast and everything. We're good friends. We hang out here all the time, like I said.
Yeah.
Cash is somebody that has brand equity in his name and his face. He's on television, he's on the radio, he's, podcasting all the time, and he's doing all sorts of stuff. So like he has an audience of Lexington that I wanted. So of course, it sounds selfish. And I totally know that, because like one thing I also think about all the time is like, it feels selfish to say out loud. It feels selfish to think in my head. Like, oh, you have an audience that I need. I'm going to just hang out with you. It's like, it's selfish if there's nothing else to it, I think.
Yeah.
But like, I'm careful with the people that I choose to align myself with.
Right.
Because we really do need to be friends. We do need to align in our beliefs in business and in life. And, certain things like don't have to align.
Exactly.
But it's like, if I have what you need, this comes back to the like filling a need for business, right? You have to actually serve a purpose. And if you don't, what are you really doing here? It's like Cash needed what I needed, or what I have in my ability to create content for him. And he has what I need, an audience that I wanted as far as, my business stuff. Did we both get what we needed? I think so. But we also, on top of that, we got a great friendship. And so now we rely and tap each other for stuff.
Yeah.
As much as we can. Same thing with like Todd Lanter. It's like Todd was a guest on the show. We sat at Jeff Ruby with his girlfriend, Maria Montgomery.
Right.
And we just sat in there recording the show together. And Todd was like really infatuated with all the gear that we had for the show. And like we kept in touch talking about podcasting and stuff. He's got a podcast called Seat 14 Podcast.
Okay.
Where he interviews like NBA players and former players from UK and stuff. And so like what started as me helping him produce his show and give some ideas and things for equipment and how to set it up and do this kind of thing, broadcast. again, turned into like, well, Todd has an audience of people I would like. And Todd's a really cool dude. We love hanging out, talk about gear. And we also developed a friendship. And it's like those three things kind of happen together at the same time, you know?
Networking.
I mean, yeah. And now it's like these relationships are blossoming and putting me in rooms with really interesting people I never would have been able to be in a room with. It's like, Cash is going to have a Backstreet Boy on his podcast September 6th, whenever they're here in Lexington. It's like, I'm going to be standing 8 feet that direction behind the camera, recording him sitting on this couch with a Backstreet Boy. Yeah. And it's like, what other opportunity would I be able to be in that kind of room? Now, does that mean I expect to have a relationship with this guest and do something directly with it? No. But, you know, there are plenty of other people that come through. Who knows? Maybe there is some sort of thing that I can help with, especially if they're going to be here in town. Maybe we go make a free video for them.
Exactly.
And maybe that does something. Yeah. You know, it's like, it's all relationship building. Yeah, it's all carefully crafting who you're in the room with. Again, you know, your reputation matters. Your brand, your reputation is your brand.
Yep.
So it's like, I would like for Branded 78 to be elevated, to be associated with great things.
Yeah. Why
with
not?
Great people.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, all of those things come in together to kind of highlight like what's next. It's like, continue to do those things. Yeah. There's not anything different, I don't think. It's like, just continue to stay true to what we know and continue to put ourselves in rooms with interesting people that have an audience of what we need to continue helping them get what they need as far as helping them out, build real meaningful relationships, not just something superficial.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know where those things always lead. So that's why I don't have a definitive answer, but it's always creating content.
I know what you're
saying. Wherever
saying.
Content moves. I mean, if Meta decides, like if Facebook and Instagram decide that they're going to just shut down tomorrow because they can't exist because TikTok is too good, cool. Then we're all in on TikTok. You know? Yeah. It's like content. I mean, we do all sorts of stuff, podcasts, YouTube, social media stuff, websites. Content is a lot of different things. It's written word.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So like, as far as like direction for the company, it's create content wherever people are. That's, again, under the guise of attention. Our clients need attention. They need customers to know that they exist so they can walk through the door and buy what they do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all connected. I love it. Yeah. And you're using networking. That's networking. That's a perfect example of networking, man. I'm amazed, but, you know, you're an intelligent mind. You got it. You got the right mindset, and you're headed in the right direction. I'm extremely excited to see where your podcast and your production company goes in the future. I'll keep my eye out, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't already, you can check out Lexington Business Show. You know, just search it in Google. You know, listen to some episodes, and you can also watch on his Instagram. Lexington. I don't have the exact tag, but I'm sure Brandon knows it. If he wants to. What's that? The handle?
Yeah. It's literally Lexington Business Show, all one word.
Yeah. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Check that out, you know, on Instagram. Yeah. Brandon Arvay, you know, thank you for coming on, man. It's been an absolute pleasure, man, getting to know your story. I'm really looking forward to see what you're going to be doing in the future, man. I'm a huge fan. You know, we talk about this off camera, so you know how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
But ladies and gentlemen, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe button as well, so we can continue to give you more content. You know, content is key, like my man said, Brandon. Content is it can be anything, you know, websites, videos, reels. We will be having a lot of reels on the great information that Brandon has, you know, given us. So we want to thank Brandon for coming on here, man. It's been a pleasure.
Well, and I appreciate you letting me come on here, Rio. You did a great job on our episode together in Spin the Block, the collaborative project with Big Blue Peddler. Literally riding through downtown, recording together, sitting on the party bike, basically. Just like through lunchtime traffic, Even had a buddy of mine. I had no idea, but he was in the car behind us out in front of the courthouse. He took a picture of us sitting up there. And
That's right, man. One experience.
It's kind of funny. It's like, always trying to find interesting, different ways to deliver. It's like I said that earlier, right? Like there are certain things that are staples and certain things that you can do that are different to call attention to yourself. And it's like, well, as a podcast is two people sitting there talking to each other. So, whatever. That is what it is. You can't really change that. But where it happens, on a bike going through town during traffic and seeing people, like that is what I can control. And that's something different that I think we can bring and stand out, So there's another example of that kind of in practice. But anyway, thank you again for letting me come on here and kind of ramble all the things that go on in my head all the time. I'm always just thinking about literally all that stuff. I found that that's what's made me successful and become where I am. It works for me. It doesn't work for anybody else, I'm sure, and that's fine. But I love what you're doing and bringing these kind of conversations from interesting people from all over. Lexington's a great town. There's a lot of fascinating people here with stories that we don't have any other way of knowing about for the most part, unless people like you and I are out there to try to tell them. And I appreciate you being in that community to try to tell them and doing it in a positive way. There are a lot of people out there, especially today. We look at some of the things on the news where there's a lot of negativity. I think you have a really positive platform to help combat that, and I think that's awesome. So keep going.
Man, I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, hit that like and subscribe button. Brandon Arvay, thank you for coming on. And that's all we got for today, ladies and gentlemen. So stay tuned. For more episodes and exclusive content, subscribe to What's Next with Rio.